You know what they say about curiosity and the cat, right? Well, no one warned me about curiosity and the wife. I should have known better. That's how I'd start this chapter of my life. The one where my world turned upside down, not with a bang, but with a whisper of freedom that sounded too sweet to be harmful. It began innocently enough. Mark and I, high school sweethearts turned life partners, found ourselves in the midst of a monotonous routine. Work, home, weekend barbecues, rinse and repeat. One evening, as we sat nursing our glasses of Merlot, Mark, with his devil-may-care grin, suggested we spice things up. How about an open marriage? He said, almost too casually. The wine must have hit me harder than I thought, because the idea didn't sound as insane as it should have. Fast forward a few weeks, and there we were, setting ground rules over breakfast. Just fun. Nothing serious, we agreed. Little did I know, I was stepping into quicksand. Mark met her at a local art gallery. He mentioned her in passing, Jenna, an artist with a laugh that filled the room. He was smitten, obviously. I played it cool, even encouraged him. But, as nights turned into weeks with him coming home late, or sometimes not at all, a gnawing sense of unease began to take root in my chest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was just a phase. He'll get over it, I whispered into the dark, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. But deep down, I knew. I knew when his texts became short and scarce. I knew when his eyes stopped searching for me across the room. One day, I found a receipt from a high-end jewelry store, not for anything I'd received. That's when the enormity of my naivety hit me. Mark wasn't just having fun. He was in deep. The rules of our little game had been shattered, but I was the last to know. Confronting him didn't go as planned. He was defensive, brushing off my concerns with excuses about work stress and needing space. Space? That was rich, coming from a man who'd made our home feel like a stranger's place. That chapter of our lives, that experiment, it wasn't just about opening our marriage. It was about opening Pandora's box. And I, like a fool, had lifted the lid with my own hands. Now, I was left with nothing but the chaos that spilled out. I can't help but think about what my grandma used to say, be careful what you wish for. Well, I certainly got more than I wished for. A lesson learned in the hardest way possible. If you think lies can't hurt you, you've never been lied to by the one you love. That's something I never understood until my life became a prime example. It's strange how one lie can turn your whole world upside down. It started with small things. Mark, my once devoted husband, began telling me he was working late. But the hushed phone calls and unexplained absences piled up. I wasn't born yesterday. I knew something was off. His excuses were flimsy, the kind that don't add up unless you desperately want them to. One night, I decided to confront him. Where are you really going, Mark? I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. His reaction was a cocktail of anger and indifference. You're imagining things, he said. That stung more than any lie. He turned away, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and heartache. The change in our home was palpable. It was as if he had built a wall around himself, leaving me and the kids on the outside. Dinner conversations turned into monosyllabic exchanges. Our kids noticed it too. They'd ask me why Daddy was so quiet. What could I tell them? That their father was living a double life? As the days passed, loneliness crept into my bones. I was living with a man who felt like a stranger. That's when I met David. He was a friend of a friend, a breath of fresh air in my suffocating world. We connected instantly, finding solace in each other's company. It wasn't something I planned. It just happened. Meanwhile, Mark's escapades became more brazen. He was spending weekends away, and I stopped asking for explanations. But then, one evening, he came home looking troubled. Jenna wants more, he confessed, almost in a whisper. Jenna, his mistress, the woman who had infiltrated our lives like a silent storm. Now she wanted more of him, more than he was willing to give, it seemed. That night, lying in bed next to a man I no longer recognized, I realized our marriage was like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breeze. The foundation we built over the years had eroded, leaving nothing but a facade. I can't help but wonder how things might have been different. But life doesn't come with a rewind button. You live, you learn, and sometimes you just survive. Sometimes life throws you a curveball so wild, it knocks you off your feet. That's how I describe the whirlwind that had become my life. You think you know how you'll react in any given situation, but trust me, you don't. Not until you're standing in the eye of the storm. It was around the time Mark's disinterest in everything, including his job, became glaringly obvious. Calls from his office became frequent, asking why he was missing meetings or deadlines. I could hear the frustration in his boss's voice, even though I was only catching one side of the conversation. Mark just brushed it off, lost in a world I was no longer a part of. Meanwhile, David, an old friend who had become so much more, was a constant in my life. What started as a distraction from my crumbling marriage had blossomed into something deeper. Our conversations weren't just idle chit-chat, they were lifelines in a sea of chaos. He listened, really listened, and in his eyes, I saw a reflection of the person I used to be. With David, I wasn't just the jilted wife or the neglected partner. I was me, and that was enough. But life has a way of complicating things when you least expect it. It was during one of our secret meetings that I noticed David's gaze linger a little longer, his touch a bit more tender. And I was diving headfirst into the emotional connection, starving for affection and understanding. Our affair wasn't just physical anymore. It had morphed into something emotionally profound, something I hadn't planned but couldn't deny. Then came the bombshell. I was tidying up Mark's home office when I stumbled upon a piece of paper that made my heart stop. It was an appointment card for a prenatal checkup. Jenna's name was on it. The room spun around me as the reality sunk in. My husband's mistress was pregnant. That moment was surreal. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, but one stood out. Our marriage wasn't just on the rocks, it had capsized. The man I had vowed to spend my life with had created a life with someone else. It was a bitter pill to swallow, made even more complicated by the growing feelings I had for David. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence of the room was deafening. Mark was in his study, probably lost in his own tangled web of lies and deceit. And there I was, caught between anger, sorrow, and guilt. I thought about my children, about the lies I would have to tell to keep their world from falling apart. I thought about David, about the unexpected comfort he provided. But one thing was clear. The life I knew, the life I had planned, was over. Now, I had to navigate through this chaos, find a new path, for me and for my kids. It wasn't going to be easy, but then again, nothing worthwhile ever is. You never really know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. This phrase echoed in my mind as I navigated the stormiest part of my life. It's funny how life can flip upside down in a blink, leaving you to pick up the pieces. The day Mark told me he was leaving me for Jenna, his mistress, was the day my world shattered. I remember him standing there, looking more defeated than determined, mumbling about finding happiness. The irony of it all was suffocating. Happiness, as if it was just lying around, waiting for him at the end of our broken marriage. Devastated doesn't quite capture what I felt. It was as if someone had pulled the ground from under my feet. But I didn't have the luxury to crumble. With 2 kids looking up to me, falling apart wasn't an option. So, I focused on the only other escape I had: my affair with David. It was a distraction, a way to fill the gaping hole Mark's departure had left. But life, as I had come to learn, was full of unexpected twists. Just when Mark's new life seemed to be taking off, it came crashing down. Jenna miscarried. The news hit me like a wave of cold water. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her, for them. It was a weird, tangled mess of emotions. Mark was lost, torn between guilt and grief. And I was an outsider looking in, unable to find solace in his turmoil. Then came another blow. Mark lost his job. Negligence, they called it. He had been too wrapped up in his affair and the subsequent drama to notice his career slipping through his fingers. It was a stark reminder of how far he had strayed from the man I once knew. As if in sync with the chaos, David decided to end our affair. He wanted something simpler, he said. A clean slate, without the baggage of broken marriages and hidden secrets. I couldn't blame him, really. Our relationship was built on a foundation of escapism, not reality. Left alone with my thoughts, I couldn't help but reflect on the series of choices that led me here. I thought I was coping, but in reality, I was just as lost as Mark. We were both running from our problems, only to crash into them head-on. Happy ending I had once imagined. It was messy, filled with regrets and what-ifs. But it was also a wake-up call, a chance to start over, to build something real this time. It wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. Sometimes, you have to hit rock bottom to realize you're made of steel. That's what I kept telling myself as I faced the most tumultuous phase of my life. I had been through the ringer, emotionally and financially, but I was still standing. Barely, but standing nonetheless. The guilt was eating Mark alive. The miscarriage, our marriage crumbling, it was a heavy load, and I could see the weight of it in his eyes. He was a shadow of the man I once knew. His attempts to talk, to apologize, were met with my cold silence. What was there to say? Some broken things can't be mended. Financial struggles came knocking next. Without Mark's income, things got tight. I juggled bills, cut corners, did whatever it took to keep the roof over our heads and food on the table. I won't lie. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of my new reality. I was alone, navigating through a storm with no end in sight. Then, Jenna left him. Mark's mistress, the woman he had risked everything for, walked away. She felt betrayed, he said. The irony wasn't lost on me. He came to me one evening, a broken man, seeking solace, forgiveness, anything, but I had nothing left to give. My heart, once so full of love for this man, was now just a well of indifference. Refusing him was both the hardest and easiest decision I'd ever made. Hard, because a part of me still cared, still remembered the good times. Easy, because I knew we were beyond repair. We had crossed a point of no return, and there was no looking back. That was the turning point for me. I realized that waiting for someone else to fix my life was a lost cause. It was up to me, and only me, to pick up the pieces. So, I started rebuilding, brick by painstaking brick. I found a job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The kids adjusted, slowly but surely. We became a team, the three of us against the world. There were good days and bad days, laughter and tears. But through it all, we had each other. I can't help but feel a sense of pride. I had come through the fire, not unscathed, but stronger. The journey ahead was still long, and I had no illusions about the challenges. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Hope for a better tomorrow, for a life rebuilt on my terms, for a future where I was no longer a victim of my circumstances, but a survivor, a warrior. And that made all the difference. It's funny how life can turn you into a person you hardly recognize, and then, just as unexpectedly, show you who you really are. I thought of this often as I navigated the next chapter of my life. After all the turmoil, the betrayal, the hurt, I was finally finding my footing. Mark's descent was like a tragic subplot in a drama. The man who once had everything was now grappling with legal issues over unpaid child support. It pained me to see him like this. But these were the consequences of his choices. The law was clear, and sympathy had no role to play in it. During this time, I found a new job. It was more than just employment, it was a lifeline, a step towards a new me. The job was demanding, but rewarding. It brought a sense of stability I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer the woman scrambling to make ends meet, but a professional, contributing and respected. Mark's situation, however, worsened. The news of him being homeless was a shock, albeit not entirely surprising. He tried to find work, but his past mistakes and current legal troubles were like shadows, following him everywhere. It was a sobering reminder of how quickly life can spiral out of control. Amidst these upheavals, I achieved something I had fought hard for, full custody of our children. It was bittersweet. The kids needed stability, a stable home, and I was determined to provide that. They missed their father, but the hurt and confusion were evident in their eyes. They were trying to make sense of a situation that even adults would find challenging. Then came the day Mark tried to reconnect with the kids. It was an awkward, emotional encounter. The children were resentful, and rightfully so. They had felt abandoned, and trust, once broken, isn't easily mended. Mark's attempts at reconciliation were met with coldness, something that seemed to break him even more. Through all this, I learned a lot about myself. I discovered a resilience I never knew I had. The challenges of being a single parent, of balancing work and home, of dealing with the emotional fallout of a broken family, had somehow made me stronger. I also learned the importance of forgiveness, not for Mark's sake, but for mine and for the kids. Holding on to anger and bitterness was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing his actions. It meant freeing myself from the hold those actions had on me. I look back with a sense of accomplishment. I had faced my darkest days and emerged not just intact, but empowered. The road ahead was still uncertain, and the scars of the past would always be a part of me. But for the first time in a long while, I looked forward to the future with hope, not fear. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, and in doing so, I had rediscovered myself. Life's like a novel, full of chapters you never saw coming. That's how I felt as I turned yet another page in my life. A page where peace and a sense of accomplishment were more than just words in a self-help book. I had built a new life, a life where chaos had given way to stability and joy. The job that had started as a necessity had grown into a career I was proud of. I found strength in the everyday routine, in the smiles of my children, and in the small victories we celebrated as a family. But life, as always, had its twists. Mark's health took a turn for the worse. The stress, the living conditions he had been enduring, it all caught up with him. I heard about his hospitalization through a mutual friend. It stirred a mix of emotions in me: concern, a tinge of sadness, but also detachment. He was a part of my past, a chapter that I had closed. Amidst this, something beautiful blossomed in my life. I met Ethan. He was different from anyone I had ever known. He brought a sense of calm and stability that I had long craved. Our relationship was built on trust and respect, on mutual understanding and shared dreams. It was refreshing to be with someone who saw me, not the baggage of my past, but me, the woman I had become. The kids took to Ethan, slowly but surely. He was patient, never overstepping, always respectful of the space they needed. It was a delicate dance of blending our lives together, and he was a perfect partner in that dance. Then came the day the kids decided to visit Mark in the hospital. It was their decision, and I supported it. They needed closure, a way to process the complicated feelings they harbored towards their father. The visit was tense, filled with unspoken words and awkward silences. They returned home quiet, reflective. It was a lot for them to take in, and I did my best to help them navigate through their emotions. That period was a testament to how far we had come. I saw a resilience in my children, a resilience that they had, perhaps, inherited from me. They were learning that life doesn't always go as planned, that it's okay to feel a range of emotions, and that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting the past. As I close this chapter, I reflect on the journey. It was marked by pain and struggles, but also by growth and newfound happiness. I had learned to let go, to forgive, and to open my heart to new possibilities. Life had thrown curveballs, but each one had taught me something invaluable. The future was uncertain, as it always is. But this time, I faced it not with apprehension, but with optimism. I had turned a new page, a page where peace and contentment were not just distant dreams, but my reality. And for that, I was profoundly grateful. Every ending is just a new beginning, they say. I used to roll my eyes at that cliché, but life has a funny way of making you believe in such sayings. This chapter of my life was all about new beginnings and the shadows of the past that lingered, reminding me of the long journey I had traversed. Ethan, my rock, became more than just a partner. He was a mentor, a friend to my kids. Seeing them laugh and share stories with him filled my heart with an indescribable warmth. He was the positive influence they sorely needed, a beacon of stability in the unpredictable sea that had been our lives. Meanwhile, Mark was discharged from the hospital, but his life was far from stable. With nowhere to go, he ended up in a shelter. Hearing about it stirred a complex cocktail of emotions in me. There was pity, a faint echo of the love that once was, and a dose of reality about the consequences of one's actions. His life had become a reflection of poor choices and lost opportunities. At work, things were looking up for me. A promotion came my way, a recognition of the hard work and dedication I had put in. It wasn't just a job title. It was security, a sense of achievement, and a step towards a better future for my family. I could finally breathe a little easier, knowing that I could provide for my children without constantly worrying about the next bill. As for Mark, I heard he spent his days in the shelter reflecting on his past decisions. Part of me hoped that this would be a turning point for him, a chance to start over and find redemption. Everyone deserves a second chance, or so I wanted to believe. But life was moving forward for me, and I wasn't looking back. Ethan proposed, and it was everything I had hoped for: simple, sincere, and full of love. The children were overjoyed. They had grown fond of Ethan, and the idea of having him as a permanent part of our family brought smiles to their faces. The engagement was a celebration of new beginnings, of love found in the most unexpected places, and of hope. It was also a testament to the strength of the human spirit, my spirit, that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. As I close this chapter, I reflect on the journey. It's been a roller coaster, with highs and lows, tears and laughter. But through it all, one thing remained constant: the unbreakable bond with my children and the unyielding determination to give them a better life. The shadows of the past still linger, reminding me of where I've been. But they don't scare me anymore. They are just part of the story, a story that is still being written. And this chapter, with its new beginnings and old shadows, is just one of many that make up the tapestry of my life. A life that, despite everything, I am proud to call my own. Life's a mix of bittersweet moments, some you wish to freeze, others you can't wait to leave behind. That's how I felt as I embarked on this new chapter, a chapter marked by fresh starts, celebrations, and the inevitable shadows of the past. Mark, trying to claw his way back from the abyss he had fallen into, managed to find a job. It was a low-paying one, but it was a start, a step towards redemption. I heard about it through the grapevine. A part of me felt relieved, maybe even a little proud. Despite everything, I wanted him to find his footing, for his sake and for our children's. Our wedding, mine and Ethan's, was right around the corner. It was a celebration of new beginnings, of love triumphing over adversity. The kids were buzzing with excitement, their laughter filling our home with an infectious joy. The wedding wasn't just about me and Ethan, it was about our family, about the journey we had embarked on together. But not everyone was sharing in our joy. Mark, the man I had once shared my life with, was notably absent from the celebrations. He wasn't invited, a decision that wasn't made lightly. It was a choice born out of a need to move forward, to not dwell in the past. I heard through mutual friends that he felt isolated, another casualty of the choices he had made. It was a hard pill to swallow, but some bridges, once burned, are hard to rebuild. As the wedding day approached, Mark tried to reconnect with old friends, perhaps seeking a semblance of the life he once had. But time had moved on, and so had they. It was a harsh reality, a reminder that the consequences of our actions can sometimes stretch far and wide. The wedding itself was everything I had dreamed of and more. It was intimate, filled with people who had stood by us through thick and thin. Ethan looked at me with eyes full of love and promise, and as we exchanged vows, I knew that this was a new beginning, a chance at a life filled with love, stability, and happiness. But amidst the celebrations, a part of me couldn't help but think about Mark. News of him realizing the full impact of his choices reached me. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of vindication, only a sobering understanding that life is a series of choices, and each choice paves the path of our future. As I close this chapter, I'm filled with a mix of emotions. There's joy and hope for the future, gratitude for the love and support of those around me, and a subdued sadness for what was lost along the way. This chapter, like the rest of my life, is a tapestry of experiences, of moments both sweet and bitter. But it's these experiences that have shaped me, made me who I am today. I step into the future not forgetting the past, but learning from it. Embracing the new joys life has to offer while acknowledging the lessons learned from the sorrows. Life is about moving forward, about writing new chapters, and I'm ready to write mine. Life is a tapestry woven from our choices, and sometimes it takes a while to see the pattern. This thought kept playing in my mind as I witnessed the myriad changes around me. Changes that were shaping not just my life, but the lives of those I cared about. Our family was thriving, like a garden that finally gets the right amount of sunshine and rain. The kids were doing well in school, their laughter and chatter a constant backdrop in our home. It was a stark contrast to the silence and uncertainty that had once hung over us like a dark cloud. They were growing, not just in height but in character, blossoming into individuals I was proud to call my children. Mark, on the other hand, was on a journey of his own. He started attending counseling, a step towards mending the pieces of his life. It wasn't easy for him. I heard about his struggles and small victories through mutual friends. Part of me was glad he was trying to change. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, no matter how far they've fallen. Ethan and I, meanwhile, took a big step. We bought a new house. It was more than just a structure of bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of our new life, of the distance we had traveled from our pasts. The day we moved in, the kids ran through the empty rooms, their laughter echoing off the walls, filling the space with hope and happiness. In the midst of all this, Mark found support in an unexpected place, his sibling. They reconnected after years of distance, and it seemed to give him a sense of belonging, a foothold in his climb out of the abyss. This rekindled relationship seemed to be a balm for his bruised soul, a reminder that no matter how far we stray, there's always a way back home. The news of Mark finding a job came as a pleasant surprise. It wasn't a high-flying career, but it was meaningful. It marked the beginning of his journey towards redemption, a testament to the fact that it's never too late to start over. I felt a sense of relief, knowing that he was finding his way back to some semblance of normalcy. As I reflect on this chapter, I realize how much we all have changed. Life had thrown us into a storm, and we had emerged, not unscathed, but stronger and wiser. The choices we made, the paths we took, had led us here. Our tapestry, woven from threads of pain, joy, loss, and love, was a colorful testament to our resilience. It reminded me that change, though often hard and painful, is also beautiful in its way. It shapes us, teaches us, and sometimes leads us to a better place. As I look forward to the future, I do so with a heart full of gratitude, grateful for the lessons learned, for the love found, and for the strength I never knew I had. Life is an ever-changing tapestry, and I am ready to see what pattern. You're acting strange, he said, staring at me across the kitchen table. His eyes, usually warm and trusting, were now cold, probing. I had noticed him watching me more intently these past weeks, his gaze lingering a little too long, his questions a bit too pointed. It was as if he was trying to piece together a puzzle, and I was the missing piece that just wouldn't fit. I tried to brush it off with a laugh. You're imagining things, I said, but my voice trembled, betraying my nervousness. I had been careful, or so I thought. The late nights out with the girls, the extra care I took with my appearance lately, the hushed phone calls when I thought he wasn't around. It was all innocent enough, but lying had never been my strong suit. But he wasn't convinced. I'm not stupid, he shot back, his voice rising. You've been different, distant. I know something's going on. His accusation hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. That night, after he thought I was asleep, I heard him typing away on his computer. Curious, I peeked over his shoulder to find him scrolling through a list titled, "Signs Your Spouse is Cheating." My heart sank as I read each point, realizing that to him, I was ticking off every box. The next day, I was careless. I took the Tesla to meet him, the man who had become my escape from the mundanity of my marriage. But I forgot about the car's location tracking, a modern convenience turn trader. My husband found out. He confronted me that evening, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. I saw where you were today, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. At the apartments on 5th Street. Why? Just tell me why. I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see the hurt in his eyes. I met someone, I admitted, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. It's nothing serious, just a mistake. A mistake, he laughed humorlessly. Is that what you call it? He was right, it was more than a mistake. It was a choice, a series of choices that have led me down this path. But I couldn't bring myself to say that. Not yet. He gave me an ultimatum then, his voice steady but his hands shaking. It's him or me, you can't have both. The finality in his tone scared me. This was real, this was happening. I wanted to tell him it was over, that I would end it with the other man. But the words felt like a lie even before I spoke them. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. My life with my husband had become predictable, safe but dull. And this affair, it was like a fire, exhilarating but destructive. I chose to lie. I'll end it, I said, meeting his gaze for the first time that night. I choose you. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. I was lost, caught between the life I had and the one I thought I wanted. And either choice would break someone's heart. I'll work on our marriage, I said, the words feeling hollow as they left my lips. I chose my family over him, but deep inside, uncertainty gnawed at me. I watched my husband's face, searching for a glimmer of hope, but all I saw was a man shattered, trying to piece his life back together. We started marriage counseling, a weekly ritual that felt more like a reckoning. Sitting in that room, with its sterile walls and a therapist who nodded more than she spoke, I felt like an actor in a play. We talked, or rather, we took turns speaking, our words carefully chosen, our emotions veiled. But the silences, oh, those were loud, filled with all the things we couldn't say. Meanwhile, he threw himself into job hunting, a desperate attempt to bring some normalcy back into our lives. He'd always been ambitious, but now there was an urgency to it, as if a better job could fix the gaping hole in our relationship. I admired his determination, but it only served as a reminder of the chasm between us. The distance grew, inevitably. We started sleeping in separate rooms, a physical manifestation of the emotional gulf that had formed. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we got here, how I got here. The man I once shared a bed with, my confidant, my partner, now felt like a stranger living under the same roof. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for our daughters. The eldest, at 17, was perceptive, her eyes often lingering on us, brimming with unasked questions. The youngest, just 5, remained blissfully unaware, her world still revolving around cartoons and crayons. I started taking them out more, just the 3 of us. Parks, movies, ice cream shops, little escapes from the tension at home. But excluding him felt wrong. Yet including him felt worse, a pretend play of a happy family that we were no longer. In those moments, away from the stifling atmosphere of our house, I'd watch our daughters laugh and play, and my heart would ache. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for them, nor the mother I wanted to be. But I was trapped in a web of my own making, each lie, each evasion, a thread holding me captive. I knew I should feel more, do more, to mend the fissures in our family. But the truth was, I was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of the guilt, tired of the yawning void inside me. I wanted to care, to fight for my marriage, my family, but the energy, the will to do so, had seeped out of me, leaving a shell of the woman I once was. And so, our days became a monotonous loop of counseling sessions, job applications, and forced family outings. A dance of going through the motions, each step taking us further away from what we once had, from who we once were. Happy anniversary, he said, his voice lacking the warmth it used to have. Our 18th anniversary dinner was nothing like the ones before. The restaurant was fancy, the kind we used to save for special occasions, but the air between us was heavy, filled with unspoken words and unshed tears. I tried to smile, to make small talk, but each word felt forced. We were like actors in a play, going through the motions, pretending for the sake of what? I wasn't even sure anymore. The food tasted bland, the wine too sweet, and all I could think of was the mess I'd made of our lives. A few days later, he confronted me with the phone records. "You're still talking to him," he said, his voice trembling with anger and hurt. I couldn't deny it. The evidence was right there in black and white. The late-night calls, the texts, the lies. "I want a divorce," I blurted out. The words hung in the air, irreversible and shattering. I'd thought about it a million times. but saying it out loud made it real, final. He looked at me, his face a mask of pain and disbelief, and for a moment, I wanted to take it all back, to rewind time and make different choices. But it was too late for that. I continued talking to the other man, telling him that my husband and I were divorcing. It was a half-truth. The divorce hadn't started, but in my mind, it was already over. I kept my husband in the dark, a cruel deception born out of cowardice and confusion. Then came the day he accidentally discovered the truth. He saw a text message, a casual, "Can't wait to see you," popping up on my phone when I was in the shower. I walked into the room to find him holding my phone, his face a mixture of rage and sorrow. "You're still seeing him," he said, his voice hollow. "Even now, even after everything." I had no words. What could I say? That I was lost? That I was torn between two lives, two versions of myself? That I didn't know who I was anymore? We stood there, in the silence of our bedroom, the room where we'd shared so many moments, good and bad. Now, it felt like a battleground, the air thick with the remnants of our broken promises and shattered dreams. That night, I lay awake in bed, alone, listening to the sound of his breathing in the other room. It was a sound that once brought me comfort, a reminder that I wasn't alone in the world. But now, it was just another reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Our anniversary dinner, meant to be a celebration of our life together, had turned into a prelude to the end. And as I drifted into a fitful sleep, I couldn't help but wonder how we got here, how I got here. From love to lies, from vows to betrayal. This wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was the one I'd created. And now, I had to live with the consequences. It started with a text message, a simple, furious text from my husband to him, unraveling the web of lies I had spun around both of them. "She's still married, not separated," he wrote. "She's been lying to us both." I found out about it when my phone buzzed with an angry call from the other man, the AP. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice a mix of confusion and betrayal. I could hear the anger bubbling beneath his words, a volcano on the verge of eruption. I tried to explain, to justify, that my words sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I was going to tell you," I stammered, but the lie was evident. The argument that followed was brutal. Accusations flew, harsh words slicing through the last thread of our relationship. He couldn't understand how I could have lied to him, just like I couldn't understand how I had ended up here, in this mess. It ended with a click, the line going dead, a finality that left me reeling. I thought it couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. My husband confronted me again, this time with evidence of my continued deceit. "I saw your Amazon history," he said, his voice cold and steady. "You've been shopping for him and his kids for Christmas. How can you still lie to my face?" I panicked, falling back on denial and gaslighting, a defense mechanism that had become second nature. "You're being paranoid," I retorted, trying to deflect his accusations. "It's just shopping. It doesn't mean anything." But even as I said it, I knew how feeble it sounded. The truth was staring us both in the face, undeniable and ugly. I had been shopping for another man and his children, a reality that betrayed the depth of my infidelity. He didn't buy my excuses, of course. How could he? I had lied too many times, crossed too many lines. Our conversation turned into a blame game, a vicious cycle of accusations and denials. I blamed him for ruining my new relationship, for not trusting me, for not being enough. He blamed me for lying, for cheating, for breaking our family apart. It was a dance we had become too familiar with, a destructive tango of hurt and resentment. And in the middle of it all, I realized how far I had fallen. From a wife and a mother to a liar and a cheater, trapped in a life of my own making. As I lay in bed that night, alone in the darkness, the magnitude of my actions weighed on me like a physical burden. I had lost the trust of the man I once loved, the respect of my daughters, and now, the affection of the man I thought was my escape. My world, once so bright and full of possibilities, had shrunk to a small, dark corner of guilt and regret. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps me out, and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. There it was, our two cars, side by side, undeniable proof of the ongoing affair. I didn't see him at first, my husband, standing there, just staring. The look on his face when I finally noticed him, it was like he'd been punched in the gut. I had no words, just a sinking feeling in my stomach. There was no talking my way out of this one. Later, he told me about a conversation he had with the app's friend. Did you know his ex-wife cheated on him? He asked, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Talk about irony. I felt a pang of something, guilt mixed with a twisted sense of kinship to a woman I'd never met. The next thing I knew, he was seeing a divorce lawyer. I overheard him on the phone, discussing custody and assets. It was happening, the end of our marriage. It felt surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life. Christmas was lonely that year. We were all under the same roof, but we might as well have been worlds apart. The girls tried to keep the holiday spirit alive, but the tension was palpable. We exchanged gifts mechanically, forced smiles plastered on our faces. I couldn't help but wonder if this would be our last Christmas together as a family. When the divorce proceedings officially started, it hit me. This was real. I was losing my husband, my family, my home. Papers were signed, and meetings were held, each one chipping away at the life we had built together. Looking back, I couldn't help but think about how we got here. The choices I made, the lies I told, the hurt I caused. It felt like a downward spiral, and I was powerless to stop it. I wondered if things could have been different if I had made other choices. But it was too late for what-ifs. The damage was done, and now we were all paying the price. It's funny how trouble at home can seep into every aspect of your life. Like a slow, creeping fog, it found its way into our daughter's life. She was always such a bright kid, you know? But lately, her grades had been slipping. Her teachers called, concerned. She seems distracted, they said. It was more than that, though. The stress of our crumbling marriage was taking its toll on her. I could see it in her eyes, the way she'd look at us, full of questions she was too scared to ask. And then there were our friends and family, picking sides as if our divorce was some kind of sport. It was like watching a slow-motion replay of every social gathering we'd ever had. Except now, the smiles were forced and the conversations were strained. People I'd known for years suddenly became distant, awkward. It was as if they thought our failure was contagious. The financial strain didn't help either. We started separating our finances, which led to more arguments than I care to remember. Every discussion about money ended in a shouting match, accusations flying back and forth. It was exhausting, like trying to hold water in my hands, impossible and frustrating. The hardest part, though, was selling the house. That house was more than just walls and a roof. It was where we brought our babies home, where we celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. Every room had a memory, and now we were just giving it all away. I remember walking through the empty rooms one last time. The echoes of our life, they're bouncing off the bare walls. It felt like leaving a part of myself behind. In the midst of all this chaos, regret started to settle in, heavy and unrelenting. I'd lie awake at night, replaying everything in my head. Could I have done things differently? Was there a moment where I could have changed course? But as much as I wanted to, I couldn't turn back time. I couldn't undo the hurt I'd caused, the trust I'd broken. It's strange, really. You spend years building a life with someone, weaving your dreams and hopes together. And then one day, you wake up to find it all unraveling, the threads coming loose, one by one. You want to stop it, to pull everything back together, but sometimes it's just too late. Sometimes, all you can do is watch as everything you built falls apart around you. The custody battle over our younger daughter was like walking through a never-ending storm. Lawyers, courtrooms, and endless arguing. It felt like every word I said was twisted, every move I made scrutinized. I wanted what was best for her, but so did he. And in our quest to win, It felt like she was the one losing the most. It didn't help that our dirty laundry had been aired for all to see. The affair, once a secret, was now public knowledge, splashed across social media and whispered about in grocery store aisles. I could feel the judgmental stares, hear the hushed tones as I walked by. Our social reputation, once pristine, was now tarnished. I was the villain in their eyes, the woman who broke up a happy home. Amidst this chaos, I made the difficult decision to move out of the family home. Packing up my things felt surreal, like I was erasing myself from my own life. Each item I put into a box was a memory, a piece of a past that was slipping away. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the silence of our broken family. Leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But I wasn't the only one struggling. My husband lost his job amidst all the personal turmoil. The stress, the court dates, the sleepless nights, it all became too much. He tried to keep it together for the girls, but I could see the strain was wearing him down. It was heartbreaking to watch the man I once loved, so strong and confident, crumble under the weight of our collapsing world. And then there was our older daughter. She had always been such a good kid, level-headed and responsible. But as our family fell apart, so did she. She started skipping school, talking back, staying out late. It was like she was a different person, one filled with anger and hurt. I tried to reach out to her, to understand what she was going through, but she pushed me away. "You've ruined everything," she'd yell, her words cutting deep. I knew she was right, but I didn't know how to fix it. In the midst of all this, I felt lost. Lost in the legal battles, lost in the public scrutiny, lost in the ruins of my family. I had set off a chain of events that I couldn't stop, consequences that rippled out, affecting everyone I loved. It was a hard pill to swallow, realizing that the life I had once cherished was now just a pile of broken pieces. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. Sitting in that courtroom, surrounded by lawyers and legal jargon, I felt like I was in the middle of a bad dream. The divorce trial was nothing like I had imagined. It was cold, formal, and utterly devoid of the love that once defined our marriage. Each word from the lawyers felt like a nail in the coffin of our relationship. The battle over assets was particularly bitter. We had built a life together, accumulated things with shared dreams and hard work. Now, it was all being dissected and divided like mere business transactions. I watched as our possessions, our memories, became bargaining chips, fought over with a ferocity that left me breathless. It was hard to believe that these things, once symbols of our life together, were now just points to be argued over in a court of law. In the midst of this legal battle, my affair, which had been my escape, turned into another anchor pulling me down. Rumors started at work, whispers behind my back, looks of pity mixed with disdain. I could feel my professional reputation slipping away. My performance suffered, my focus waned, and I could sense the disappointment from my colleagues and superiors. It was a downfall of my own making, and it stung with every whispered gossip and sidelong glance. When the final verdict of our divorce was announced, it was like waking up to a harsh new reality. The financial loss was significant for both of us. The life we had built over years was dismantled in a matter of months. Savings, investments, plans for the future, all of it had to be reevaluated, redistributed. It wasn't just the loss of assets, it was the loss of security, of plans we had made together. The finality of it left me reeling, struggling to comprehend how everything had changed so drastically. And then, the AP left me. He said the situation was too complicated, too messy. He couldn't handle the drama, the constant strain. His departure was a bitter pill to swallow. I had risked everything for this relationship, and now I was left with nothing. He walked away with ease, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my shattered life alone. It was a wake-up call, a harsh reminder of the consequences of my choices. I had lost my husband, strained my relationship with my daughters, jeopardized my career, and now, even the man I left them for was gone. I sat alone in my new, smaller apartment, surrounded by boxes of a life that once was, and I couldn't help but wonder, was it all worth it? The answer echoed in the empty rooms, a resounding, unequivocal no. As I watched him from a distance, juggling groceries and our youngest daughter's school backpack, I couldn't help but marvel at how well he had adjusted to being a single parent. He seemed more organized, more focused. I could see the strain of solo parenting on his face, yet there was a determination in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. It was his new normal, a life he was building without me, and he was doing it with a resilience that both impressed and pained me. In contrast, I found myself spiraling into isolation. Friends who once filled my days with laughter and plans were now distant memories. Family gatherings happened without me. The empty seat at the table was a stark reminder of the consequences of my actions. My world, which used to be so full of people and warmth, had shrunk to the confines of my small apartment. The silence was deafening, a constant echo of the choices I had made. Financial hardship hit us both hard post-divorce. The legal fees, the division of assets, and the cost of setting up separate homes drained our savings. I struggled to make ends meet, juggling bills and unexpected expenses. The lifestyle I was accustomed to seemed like a distant dream. Every penny spent was a reminder of the financial stability I had once taken for granted, now a casualty of our broken marriage. Our daughters, caught in the crossfire of our split, started therapy to cope with the divorce. It broke my heart to see them struggle, to watch as they grappled with emotions too complex for their young minds. Therapy sessions were their safe space, a place where they could unravel their feelings. I'd often find little notes or drawings from their sessions, glimpses into their inner turmoil. It pained me to know that their pain was a result of my actions. Amidst all this, I found myself reflecting on my mistakes. The guilt was a constant companion, gnawing at me in quiet moments. I tried to express my remorse to him, to apologize for the hurt I had caused. But my attempts were met with coldness, a barrier that he had rightfully built around himself. He listened, nodded, but his eyes were void of the warmth they once held for me. It was a rejection that stung, a clear message that some wounds were too deep to heal. In those moments of reflection, I realized the full extent of the damage I had caused, not just to my marriage, but to my family, my children, and myself. The road to forgiveness, both seeking it and giving it to myself, was long and uncertain. But it was a journey I knew I had to undertake, a path I had to walk to find some semblance of peace amidst the chaos I had created. He got a new job, a fresh start in a different company. I heard about it through the grapevine, our once shared friends now more his than mine. He seemed happier, or at least as happy as one could be under our circumstances. It was a good job, one that demanded much of his time and energy, but it also gave him a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. I was glad for him, truly, but his moving forward also made me painfully aware of how stuck I felt in my own life. In the quiet of my apartment, I had a lot of time to think, to reflect on everything that had happened. The loneliness was overwhelming, a constant reminder of the cost of my actions. I had lost my family, my friends, and the stability that I once took for granted. Some days, it felt like I was living in a fog, going through the motions of life without really living. The full impact of what I had done, the lives I had upended, weighed heavily on me. I wondered if I would ever be able to forgive myself, to move past the guilt and the regret. Then came the rumors about the app's new affair. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, a mirror reflecting my own mistakes back at me. The news spread quickly, the gossip mill churning out details that were both painful and familiar. I couldn't help but see the irony in it all, the cycle of cheating continuing on, leaving more broken hearts in its wake. It was a stark reminder of the destructive nature of infidelity, a pattern I had been a part of. Amidst all this, my ex-husband took a step that surprised me. He shared our story publicly, speaking about the cost of infidelity. His words were raw and honest, painting a vivid picture of the pain and destruction caused by cheating. It was a brave thing to do, to lay bare our most private pain for the world to see. But he did it with the hope of preventing others from making the same mistakes we did. His message was clear. The cost of infidelity is high, and the damage it causes can be irreparable. As for him, he continued to focus on our daughters and his new life. He was rebuilding, piece by piece, a world that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, I knew that. There were challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. but he faced them with a resilience that I admired. He was creating a new normal for himself and our girls, a life filled with love, stability, and hope. Watching him from a distance, I couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and sadness. Pride in the man he had become, the strength he had shown, and sadness for the part one played in his need to rebuild. Our paths had diverged, his leading him to new beginnings, and mine. Well, I was still figuring that out. But one thing was clear. We were both moving forward, in our own ways, learning from our mistakes and trying to build something new from the